So earlier in the series, we created this class called message user. Basically what it did was it allows us to add in a user's name, their amount that they paid, or some random just variable that has an amount, as well as their email. And we did some stuff like develop messages from this. So if we take a look at this and actually run it, it will give us some code back. So let's go ahead and copy the day 12 start. Of course, if you're just copying the message user class that we created before, it should work just fine too. So I'm going to go ahead and copy that, paste in here, and we see all those different messages, right? It actually comes through and it's going to go through our different users and do the things that we sort of expect. So what we want to do now is actually adjust this to, instead of just making the message, to actually send out emails. Notice one thing I did adjust is I added an email to each one of these users. So what I want to do is during this make message call, I'm going to do one more thing, and that is actually add a place for the users that have emails. If you remember, the email was optional for that particular user. So I'm going to come up here and say email messages or email details, and I'm going to put it equal to an empty list. This email details is going to be similar to user details in the fact that it will actually have dictionaries inside of it. So during our make messages list, we're going to come in here and we're going to say, I'm going to say user email equals to detail.get. This time it's using .get because .get allows this to be none, where if this is empty, it will raise an error. So if user email, then we're going to do self.emaildetails.append. Well, I don't want to just append the user email. Instead, I want to append user data equaling to a dictionary here. And I'll say email is user email. And then the message is the new MSG. This, right? So the formatted message that we wanted. And then now I'm going to put this user data inside of this append message. And if there is not a user email, I'm now going to have an else call for the just standard messages. So this make messages method is still doing the same thing, except now we're creating a new array that gives us the email and the message. Just slightly different, not a huge deal. So now what we want to do is actually define send emails or send email, and I'll say self. And what this is going to do is it's going to, first of all, make the messages or make sure the messages are made. And then it's going to determine whether or not the email details, or sorry, not email details, the email details, this is probably just should be email messages. Let's just call it that to make it nice and easy on us. So it's going to check to make sure that the email messages has some length, and then it's going to try and send each individual one. So to do this, we'll first off say self.makeMessages. So again, that's going to go through all the user details, and then it's going to make the messages for us. I will say right away, we are doing some redundant things here, only to show you how we can use a previously built class to use that message in particular. Definitely we'll come back to improving all of this. I want to say that right off the bat. So now what we're going to do is if the length of self.emailMessages is greater than 0, then we're going to run through a for loop. So for detail in self.emailMessages, that again is getting the detail list that's coming in the email messages. So it's not a whole lot different than what we've seen before. But now what we'll say is user email is equal to detail email. Now we know detail of email is going to exist because of all of this right here. We made sure that it existed, and the only way email messages will have anything in it is if there is a dictionary value with that particular email. So now we've got their email, and we also have their message. So user message equals to detail and message. Right? So now we're at a part where, well, we can actually run our email stuff. So I'm just going to say run email here. And then after the for loop, we are going to go ahead and return true. So notice it's on the same line as that for loop. And then the same line as the if statement will just return false. So basically, if it sends some stuff, it will say true. If it didn't, it'll say false. So now we have to run this email. If we go back into our email format, the HTML formatted email stuff, we're basically going to be doing this exact thing. So I'm going to go ahead and copy the entire thing here, and I'm going to come into day 12. Actually, let's do it in parts. I'm going to copy the imports first and bring that to the top of day 12 start, well, at least right under the import time. And then I'm going to set up a few things, the to list and our host list here. All right, so I got those two things coming through. Cool. So now I'm going to go ahead and copy the try block, the entire thing, and we're going to bring it into that method where it says run email. I'm going to paste it in here. Notice the spacing's a bit off, so I want to tab these things in because I want the try to be equal to the user message and the user email, basically inside of this for loop block. And now what I want to do is I'm going to get rid of these messages because we no longer need those. And part 1 and part 2, I'm going to get rid of part 2. No longer need that either. I'm just going to stick with part 1 for now. And we're going to grab the message. It's no longer plain text, but rather user message. And we can now add that to item, which is the user email. And the to list, I am no longer going to put it into that to list in particular. Instead, I'm just going to put the user email into a list in of itself. So this should work as far as our send email message is concerned. Notice our subject here is, we can just call this billing update, something like that. Now I should get something like 5 emails from this once I actually run it. But if we go line by line, just to discuss it real quick, first of all, we format the messages with make message. We also add the message and email to any given user. We check to make sure that's used. We go through those messages. We get the details that are in it. We set up the email, or at least run the email message as we've done in the last one. And then finally, we return some value. Now, of course, we can return false on this exception as well, because that would assume that the email was not actually sent. But I don't want to return false. I want it to just keep going through because it's in a for loop. So I don't want to actually return anything here because it's iterating through all of this data. It's not just stopping after 1. Okay, cool. So now that we've got this, instead of make messages for object, we're just going to do send email. All right. So let's go ahead and copy this entire thing, and fingers crossed, hopefully it works. I'm going to go ahead and paste it in. Seems like everything worked so far. I have no errors. I have not pressed enter on the send email stuff, but I had no errors as far as the pasting of this file and this data is concerned. If you do have errors, it's likely due to spacing. Like if you have an enter here and there's a space like that, that's going to raise errors when you copy and paste. Okay, so now that we've got that, let's go ahead and send our emails. Notice it's going to take a little bit of time because it's going to format that message. Then it's actually going to connect to our email exactly, and then it's going to send that actual email. It did return true, so chances are good that it actually emailed everything. Now, we raise this exception error, which we did not see this print statement, so nothing went bad. But if we saw a printed statement saying error sending message, it would not break the program. Rather, it would just print out that item. If we did not have this try block and an exception occurred, the program would break. So that's something I would challenge you to check out and try to do. So try to break this sendmail function. I'll give you a hint. Change the password and get rid of the try and exception block. You'll see it broken. Okay, cool. So now let's actually check our email. And there it is. All of our emails are there. Notice that the names are all different. The dates are the same because of the date time stuff. But the prices should all be different. So 123, 94, 93, so on, right? So we could check all of those and they should correspond to this data. We now have a way to go through data and send out emails. Now, of course, this actual class for sending out a message to a user isn't that great. In fact, there's a lot of fundamental errors to it. One of them being how we did this message, right? So we went off of some string that's in this class. I don't like that concept whatsoever because then it requires you to know a lot about programming, or at least feel comfortable with programming, to come in and actually change this where we can make it a little bit better. And that's something that we will do very soon. But overall, this class, although it's not the cleanest and best version of what we could do, it works. And it works really, really well, and as you would expect. The one big thing here too that also works is if we didn't have an email here, the program of send email should not break. In fact, it should just ignore that user, and that's of course because of this block right here. So again, we can actually improve all of this stuff, and that's something we'll be doing over a little bit of time on, not to mention just this whole function itself, but also how we're going to be rendering out the content for the message itself, because we did leave out that HTML stuff. Cool. So if you have any questions here, let us know. One thing I will challenge you, we will get to eventually, I will challenge you to figure out how can we make this more efficient. I could give you a huge hint, but there is definitely a way to make this whole part just slightly more efficient than how it's currently set up. I will give you a hint. It has something to do with the login portion. Cool. So thanks for watching. Hope to see you in the next one.